This is ODAT Chat, your instant connection to recovery and community, one day at a time. This podcast may contain strong language, sexual content, and spiritual truth. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey friend, welcome to another episode of the ODAT Chat podcast. Thanks for joining me today. If you are new here, my name is Arlena and I'll be the host. I would personally like to invite you to join the Facebook ODAT Chat community. There's a link to it on the website. Just visit odatchat.com, and ODAT is spelled O-D-A-A-T. You can also find out more about today's guest and past guests on the website as well. This is a podcast where my guests and I talk about how to recover from alcoholism and addiction. I'm looking to uncover the causes and conditions, the lessons learned along the way, and the tools and practices which lead to long-term recovery. Today, my guest is Nancy Carr. She is a writer and a sober blogger, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this episode with Nancy. Every once in a while, I meet someone that I have an instant connection with, and that was definitely the case with Nancy. She's funny, authentic, and she's super beautiful and has obviously done a ton of work on her recovery, which I deeply respect. You can actually find Nancy on the interwebs at lastcallblog.me. You can also buy her book on Amazon. I'll leave a link to it in the show notes at odatchat.com. So with that, please enjoy this episode with Nancy. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for joining me on the ODAT Chat podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Arlena. I'm super excited to be here and to chat with you.
Well, listen, it's my honor. I was super excited to meet you at She Recovers. We have some mutual friends, and I think Anna David invited you to a dinner earlier that same week, and I wasn't able to attend, but I still got to meet you virtually and then in person. So I'm excited that we're going to have a chance to chat. And so you're an author. And tell me a little bit about your book, because I really want to get into how it all came about. And maybe we can start with telling me a little bit about your book.
Yeah. So, I didn't intend on saying, I'm going to write my memoir. Like, it's time for me to write my memoir, right? So I got sober back in 2004. And right about 6 months before then, I had been keeping a journal and had been just pretty much typing about my life and how miserable I was and how, I knew I had a drug and an alcohol problem, but I kind of didn't think like getting sober was my solution, right? So I would just bitch and moan in my journal about it. And anyway, so once I finally got sober and started doing some intense step work, I kind of continued this journal that I had already started like 6 months prior to getting clean and sober. And I kind of started typing out my first step, which ended up being a pretty extensive, what I'd say, kind of quick synopsis of my story per se. Mm-hmm. And through that exercise, I actually, I had just read A Million Little Pieces by James Fry. I had read Carolyn Knapp's book about getting sober, Drinking a Love Story. So I had these books in my head, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to put something together, because I'd been writing like essays and short stories. I'd gotten something else published in a book a couple of years prior. So, writing was something that came pretty easily to me. So I started doing this process, and I guess about 9 or 10 months into it, I took a couple classes like at the local college for writing, and I had my instructor at the time review it because I kind of set it up that way. And she reviewed it, and anyway, we got to talking, and she ended up becoming my editor, long story short.
Wow.
And at the time, I was like, I was a little nervous because it was pretty raw, right? So I wrote this in my first year and a half of being sober. So, when you're early in sobriety, you're like telling everybody, I'm sober, this is great. At least I was, right?
I think everybody shouts it from the rooftops because you're so happy you found a solution. You want to share it with everyone.
Yeah, like early on, right? But the longer I'm sober, the less I'm like, screaming it at the rooftops. However, of course, I'm always happy to share break my anonymity if I need to. But so yeah, I was nervous about that because I knew that I'd written some things that were like, a little scary and raw and emotional and honest. And anyway, so this woman ended up becoming my editor, and we spent probably about another 8 months going through it together. She helped me with query letters. Like she helped me doing everything as far as trying to, after, we finished the final product, she tried to help me get an agent or a publisher or anybody interested.
Wow.
Did you say something?
No, I was just amazed that that's a long process, right? 8 months? Or is that normal?
I wrote it. Yeah. Like I at around 8 months, I went to her with it and then worked with her for another 8 months. So yeah, almost 2 years, right? Because I remember writing the ending when I was 2 years sober, because I just started dating this guy and I was like all happy, right, to have this like ending, which I used them up in the epilogue. But anyway, so yeah, it was about a 2-year process, right? And I did like the dog and pony show and scrambled to get somebody to have interest in it, and nobody had interest in it at the time. And I was like, okay, but I had like friends and family read it, and everybody thought it was exciting and interesting, and well, yay for you, I'm sober, right? So it sat on a bookshelf literally for about 10 years. So from 2000, let's say from 2006 to 2015, it literally sat on a bookshelf. And, life got busy. Life got lifey. Like I had a full-time career. I ended up getting married. I moved around like 4 or 5 times before I came back to San Diego, where I got sober originally. And life was in session. So I wasn't like dying to get this book published. However, in early 2015, a friend of mine had published something on Amazon, self-published it. And she had read my book. And she said, you know what, you should try to use this as an avenue to get your message out. And I researched it. I looked into it. I literally did not know what I was doing, just from the standpoint of, how does anybody even self-publish a book, let alone get the word out, right? And this was kind of right around the time when I think a lot of like the sober blogging community started coming up onto the internet. Mm-hmm. I had already had a sober blog, which I wasn't using that much, but then I started using it as a vehicle to kind of launch the book. The blog is the same name as the book, so it's Last Call. That's the name of my book, which I love that name.
So great. Yeah.
So I started just kind of learning as I went and getting connected to people, and pretty soon, within a few months, I was ensconced in this really amazing online sober blogging community. Kelly Fitzgerald, the sober senior reader, Veronica Valley, Lara Frazier, Holly Whitaker, Laura McCowan, like all these people had these great blogs and were doing all these amazing things, right? And then after that, I went to the addiction rally in DC, which was in October of that year, and got to meet everybody face to face. So it ended up becoming like this great foundation for me as far as getting really connected to this writing, sober blogging environment, men and women actually. But by then I'd launched my book in like March of that year. And it, I think to date, it's not selling, I'm not selling 20,000 copies, right? I think I've sold 5,000 copies to date.
Oh, that's pretty good though.
Yeah. And you know what the thing is? I got so much positive feedback from women. And I was trying to aim my book more towards individuals, or women, I should say, in high school and college that were drinking a lot and doing a lot of cocaine and sleeping with a ton of guys. Cause that was my story for 20 plus years. Like that was
it. Scissor.
Right. And it was one of those things where I was like, you don't even need to read my book. Like, that's it. That's what I just told you.
That was it.
But, and I was getting emails from women saying, "Oh my gosh, I can relate. Thank you so much. This helped me." And and that was the impetus to really wanting to push it, and really wanting to kind of help other people. And that to me is like just makes me so happy that I've been able to get that feedback and to have those kind of reviews. And do I have a second book in me? I don't know, but my life it's still really busy in session with another career. So I kind of just really like to, kind of hold on to my blog and massage that a lot and get to use that a lot as a vehicle as well. But the book is still selling. It's interesting. I still getting emails to this day. So it's 3 years later and it's still getting out there into the marketplace.
No, that's so cool. Like a couple of things that came up for me as you were sharing that was, and I had to laugh because it's like we're soul twins in some ways. I've been sober for a while, and at meetings in this area, people have heard me saying this thing for 20 years. My tagline is that if it's in a bottle, a bag, or blue jeans, I was doing it.
Oh my God, I love that. That's
Isn't that fun?
Tagline. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
but
we totally would have gotten along.
I know. We would've been great.
All bag or blue jeans that were.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting along now, so it all comes full circle.
I meant before we got sober, you would have been one of my sidekicks, right?
I know for sure. Yeah, no, that's so funny. And then the other thing that came up for me was just that wanting to, share the message of this is what it was like for me, and you can have it too. It's the same message as we felt when we first got sober. Is here I was totally suffering and in pain and feeling lost and confused. Everybody else seemed to know what was going on, but I didn't. And then suddenly I find this different way of life, a community of people who were just as crazy. They got my kind of crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I was able to recover. And so I totally understand wanting to shout it from the rooftops. And I love how, you're still, even though you've been sober a long time, you still are giving it away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of those paradoxes that you got to give it away to keep it. But
right.
Don't you find that giving away the message and the story and sharing from your heart only enriches you? Like, what do you get out of giving it away?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the more that I can share my experience to help somebody else, or not even to help somebody else, but just to share it so others can hear, I think you and I both go to 12-step meetings and probably work with women, and I sponsor women. And just sitting together with somebody and having that common bond and that understanding of, oh, I've been there, I get that, and telling somebody else, like, it does get better. Mm-hmm. It might get different. It might not get better overnight, but, I know for me, when I was like 60 days clean and sober, I was shocked that I hadn't had a drink or a drug in 60 days. And I think the thing that kept me from thinking or obsessing about it is, I came into 12-step and I got busy. I made girlfriends pretty quickly. We all kind of palled around together. Mm-hmm. We worked the steps and we got a sponsor and we did everything that, we're told to do. Right. Yeah. And life just got so full that drinking and drugging, wasn't even an option. Like, I always like to say, the two things that made me the happiest, cocaine and alcohol, before I got sober, to take those two things out of my life to make me happy never even came into my brain as far as what's a solution for me, because I was always searching for something to fix. Right. Whether it was the new job, the new car, the new boyfriend, I had like 25 geographics by the time I got sober. So it was always searching for something. And then the fact that it was sobriety and recovery and a fellowship and, spirituality, all those things I had never would have crossed my mind.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
Right. And my second DUI is what got me in the rooms. I would, if I did not get that DUI, I can guarantee you I would not be sober, because I knew my life was messed up. I just didn't care. I was like, I'm just going to ride this till the wheels fall off and keep hanging around the people that are like me. Like, we look pretty good on the outside. We have semi-decent careers, but we like to party, like
hard
and staying up for days and drinking. And that made sense. I mean, I was living my life at 37 when I got sober, the same way I was living my life at 19. So there wasn't any difference, except, the players and the characters and the geographics and locations and jobs were different. But the lifestyle was the same.
Yeah. Wherever you go, there you are, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, let me do this. Let's step back for a minute and talk about, because I want to get to the place of, the second DUI and what got you into the program. But I'm always curious about people's family of origin, because, what dad does for a living, whether they were present or not, where was mom when she was doing, our siblings. I feel like that plays such a big part into, whether we, acquire an addiction or develop one or whatever.
Right.
So I'm just so curious. What did your dad do professionally?
So my dad actually was in sales and in insurance sales.
Okay.
my parents met when my mom was 13 and my dad was 15, and they lived around the corner from each other in Brooklyn, New York, right?
How cute is that?
Yeah, it's super cute. And my dad was a really good salesman, and he got transferred a lot when I was growing up, and he was really successful. And we ended up in the suburb of Philadelphia when I was in 4th grade, and pretty much, stayed there as a family. And so, there was, and I had like the perfect mom, right? Like the PTA mom, the brownie troop leader,
nice.
the mom that was making you the chocolate chip bunny pancakes in the morning before school, so I grew up in this very idyllic household, but I will say there was alcoholism in the family. So.
Do you have siblings?
I have an older brother and a younger sister.
Oh, you're the middle child.
I'm the middle child, right?
I have an older sister and a younger brother.
Oh, there we go. Another similarity. But I mean, growing up, we never wanted for anything, but I always felt different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember the first time I ever saw alcohol because it was always around. But I do remember it when I was 5 years old, before I ever even drank alcohol, I ate a whole bottle of children's aspirin, St. Joseph's children's aspirin, because they tasted like sweet tarts. Remember those things?
Those are sweet. Yeah.
I ate the whole bottle.
Orangey.
I got sick, and then I did it again like 2 weeks later.
Oh my God.
And I did not remember that story until I got sober. And that to me was clearly alcoholic behavior before I ever took a drink. But I always felt very anxious. And when I remember being like 7th, 8th grade, I felt anxious and excitable. And, I played sports. I hung out with the cool kids. I did all that stuff that we're taught to do growing up. But by the time I had my first drink at 13, I was finally like, oh my God, now I get it. It was like my aha moment. Now I get why alcohol is so glamorized in the movies.
Yeah.
My brother goes to drinking parties. He was 3 years older than me. I understood that. My parents would go out, and my dad always had a bottle or a can of beer with them. So it all made sense to me. It like clicked. How people talk about the click when they drink. So after that, I was kind of like, let's keep doing this, And I mean, I got sick and everything my first time. It wasn't like great, but I just remember that feeling. It's the feeling,
It's the feeling. Yeah, I totally get that. My first drink, I didn't realize how bad I felt until I felt really good.
Exactly, right? I didn't get what all the excitement was and all the hubbub. And then I'm like, oh, now I get it. Yep.
This is amazing.
Yeah, this is great.
Like magic. Okay, so tell me about that first drink. What prompted you to take the drink?
So I was 13. We were at the Jersey Shore. We had a house down there in the summer. It was in Avalon, New Jersey. My parents were out for the night. My brother was out for the night. There was a teenage drinking party that was happening where we were living. And this girl invited me, and she thought I was 15. So she invited me to this party, and I said, of course. And, I remember getting decked out, and I think I had like the Calvin Klein jeans and the white, what are those called? The puppy shirts with all the ruffles, right? Remember those puppy shirts?
Yeah.
The peasant shirts, right?
A peasant shirt, yeah.
And I used like my mom's makeup. Anyway, I remember it was like a big, exciting thing to go to this party. And I went to this party, and they were serving like jungle juice, like grain alcohol punch. So I didn't even taste the alcohol. I had like 3 glasses, and whatever. I was like, oh yeah, this is it. And this moment is documented really well in my book. But anyway, and after that, but I remember my parents came home that night. My brother was mad at me because I was drunk and I was crying, and I don't even know why I was crying, but because he was yelling at me like, you better go to bed, mom and dad are coming home soon. And they came home, and they knew, my brother told them that I had went to a party and I was drinking or whatever. And like, I just remember my mom like putting me to bed and like rubbing my hair and just like saying, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. And like that memory is so vivid because it's just such a poignant thing to be like, yeah, well, it really wasn't okay. Right. But I wasn't grounded. I wasn't talked to about alcohol. Because nobody in my family would talk about alcohol. Like, there was a lot of alcoholism throughout both sides of my family. So nobody would discuss it, like, and so it was just like normal, right? As far as like, okay, now I'm going back, that was in summer. I go back to school in 8th grade and all my other friends started drinking that summer. And, like, so it just was that normal progression we have like through high school and after.
Yeah. Did you have any consequences during high school?
Or was it still
pretty
I didn't
fun?
have any consequences during high school. I'd say it happened probably after high school is when the consequences were happening.
Okay. Well, how did the consequences started showing up?
Well, at 16, I was introduced to cocaine.
At 16?
Yeah. And at 19, I started dating the first cocaine dealer.
Nice.
I had a number of those boyfriends because that's the way to do it, right? If you're going to want to have that be your drug of choice, at least go to the direct source. So,
right.
So by that time, I was, I'd gone to like a business secretarial school after high school. So I started working by 19, 20.
Oh, okay.
I was already working, making my own money. And so anyway, so yeah, I started, I started doing cocaine very frequently and was, really involved in my boyfriend's operation, like weighing it out and, selling it, thinking I was so cool. Like looking back now, I'm like, oh God, just no compass, no compass whatsoever. No moral
compass.
Yeah, none of that, like none of the morals I was raised with were coming through whatsoever, but my parents were going through a divorce. My brother was at college. My sister was having issues. Like there was a lot of turmoil within my family. So for me to just date some guy and, start doing this, it wasn't like anybody was quote unquote really noticing. It did get bad for a while and I ended up in detox for like a week until I had my dad like come save me and get me out of there. And I just kept doing what I was doing. And a couple years later, they did an intervention and nothing changed from that either. I'd actually ended up gaining some weight. So they were, I think, more concerned about the weight than the drug and alcohol problem, which I think they kind of knew about. But back then, this was like in 1989, like nobody knew what to do. There wasn't like treatment. There wasn't real interventions. This intervention was like my mom and like my best girlfriends sitting me around telling me, how I've been fucking up and how disappointed they were in me. But there wasn't like the solution. I remember the solution was my mom took me to Jenny Craig.
So wait, Jenny Craig is typically weight loss, right?
It is. So I had gotten, like I said, I was overweight. I'd also gained some weight.
On cocaine?
Yes. So it's so funny you say that. So I was at a point where I was able to eat. I mean, I was doing so much cocaine that it didn't matter. Like as far as like, I could just do a bunch of it and still eat.
Really? Okay.
It was like, I thought to me was like, wow, I'm really, into this stuff. Because initially when I started doing it, I couldn't eat. Okay. But then I got to a point where I was eating. And then actually when I wasn't doing the cocaine, then I was eating twice as much because I was just craving like salt.
Ravenous.
Right? Yeah. So it was, and I was also doing acid and ecstasy. So I was just like that human garbage pail. This was in my early 20s. So my 20s were a real blur. By the time I got to my late 20s, I'd like established a career. I figured out how to make my drug and alcohol like lifestyle work for me where I wasn't outwardly looking like I was fucked up all the time,
So you were more of like a, like functioning,
I was functioning, I'd say. By the time I was 30, I was functioning. Yeah.
So where did your work ethic come from? Did you always have just had like this work ethic that you worked really hard and you were able to?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So the day I turned 16, my dad made me go out and get a job.
Oh, wow.
So, and he did it with my brother and sister. You have to understand, like my dad was raised in like in a 2-room apartment in Brooklyn, New York, and didn't come from much. So he was very,
hardworking.
To kind of get your place in the world, you need to be a hard worker and you need to, you need to do certain things to kind of, to be successful. Mm-hmm. So that was ingrained in all of us, by my dad growing up, which I think we all really appreciate, especially now looking at, the young people today and stuff. But anyway, so that was definitely something that was ingrained in me. So having a career of sorts was important to me as well. And I kind of moved into the career I have now when I was about 29.
Okay. And that's your corporate executive?
Corporate recruiting.
Corporate recruiting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in the corporate world too. And sometimes don't you ever have that feeling like if they only knew who I really am?
Oh my gosh, all the time.
The imposter syndrome.
I still feel that way too. I still worry. So, yeah, I still worry like people I work with will find out about my book or read it because they don't really know about it. I don't share it with,
So I'm going to derail you for a second here, because don't you find that in corporate America, that recovery is sort of like a coming out process? Like, I would want people to know who I am before I share that, because I don't want them to either treat me like I'm fragile, or like there's so much misinformation out there about like what addiction and alcoholism really is about.
Right.
That it's weird, right?
Yeah, it's totally weird. And I totally agree with that. Throughout the years that I've been sober, some people I've worked with, some coworkers and even bosses have known, either before I got sober or after I'd shared it with them. But I think for the company I'm with now, it's a pretty young company. There's about 45 of us. They all know I don't drink, or at least I don't drink, but nobody's ever really asked because nobody really cares. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not like, why is she not drinking?
Yeah, they don't care.
A lot of millennials, and nobody's like questioning why I'm not drinking. The CEO of our company, I don't even think he's 50 years old. So it's a very young environment, but for me to really come out to that environment, I don't think would do me well. But I have to prior bosses with other companies I've been with and had nothing but respect from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's different. I think it's different depending upon who you work with. I work from home, and the company I work for is on the East Coast. So I'm not in the office day to day. I see them about 2-3 times a year when I go back for company functions. So it's different.
Yeah. And I also think that in corporate America, people are trained not to ask personal questions, right? It's like there's just this PC, it's just in the air that you don't really ask people about their personal lives unless people want to divulge. We don't talk about being recovered or gay, or we don't talk about mental illness. We don't talk about physical. I mean, there's so much. It's like we're all kind of just like these robots at work a little bit.
It's so true, right? Like, nobody's talking about that. Like, a woman I work with now, I've known her. She knew me before I got sober, and we've been working off and on together through the years, and we've been working out together for the last 3 years. So she knew me before I got sober. We're pretty close friends as well. So she knows where all the bodies are buried. She knows everything, right? And so it's kind of nice to have that, like, kind of that security blanket, where I work, that somebody knows all my craziness and all my dark secrets. And she's always been super supportive. So that's
loves you anyway.
But like the day-to-day people I work with are not at all. No.
Yeah, it's not really relevant. I could see how in your situation where you're working from home, you don't really interact. It doesn't probably ever come.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
No.
That's pretty cool. Okay. So, but I want to get back to, I want to wind our way to the DUIs.
Oh yes, those were
good
fun
times. Yeah, because I, in my drinking career towards the end, especially, I was dating a DUI cop. So I had a.
Oh, nice.
I know, it was great. It was like a get out.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, literally, I would hand his his business card with my driver's license like 4 times, and they let me go.
Get out.
Yeah, or they'd follow me home so that nobody else would pull me. It was a thing. It was kind of cool.
He kind of kept you from probably hitting a bottom of some sort.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just so grateful that didn't happen, because I'll tell you what, twice I went with him on what they called a ride along.
A ride along, yeah.
Yeah, I went twice, and he arrested people I knew both times.
No way!
Oh my God! So awkward, because when you pull somebody over, they put on the floodlights, right? And they take the person, and I'm not allowed out of the car. So, and they're calling in the license plate and everything, right? So, people know, like back in the office, I don't know who it is, but anyway, you pull them over and there's the lights on, and they would get out of the car and I'd be like, oh my God. The only guy I ever dated in high school was one of them. So he gets in the back, and it was his second DUI within 6 months. So in California, you're a keeper, right? Yeah. They don't turn you loose. Yeah. So he gets in the bag, and I'm like, hi. Hey.
You should totally write about those experiences if you haven't.
Oh yeah. And my cop boyfriend was also married. So that was super fun.
Oh my God. Do you
Yeah.
have a book out? I want to read about your stuff.
I'm in Anna David's writing class.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are in that writing class I know are getting published. It sounds like I know it's a great thing because I've talked to Anna a lot about it, and I know a lot of people that have taken it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I'll have, and you know, what's interesting is, I don't mean to make this about me, but I'm super excited that when my book proposal is done, will be around my 25th sobriety anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah. So the class is 6 months. So in 6 months, I'll be sober half my life.
Wow.
Cool.
You got sober at 25?
I did.
That's great.
Yeah, I crashed and burned kind of early.
Yeah, really?
I just couldn't hold out.
It sounds like you condensed a lot in those 25 years, though. So
yeah, I drank as long as I could.
Yeah.
But let's talk, because so when people talk about DUIs, I've seen what it looks like from the other side. It's horrible. But so I think where we left off was when you started your career. So when did you get your first DUI, or when were you starting to get some of those consequences?
Yeah. So, and the consequences I had before the DUIs were really just broken relationships, broken bones, literally, different jobs. Every 2 years I was kind of switching jobs because I was worried that they'd find out. Right. That stint in detox, the family intervention. And anyway, so I got my first DUI. I left the Philadelphia area and moved to San Diego to open an office for a company I was working with at the time. So I moved in 1999 to California. My first visit back at Christmas, I found out, I was out with friends, and I had found out that my ex-boyfriend that I had been with for like 4 years, who I was madly in love with and thought we'd marry, but we broke up like 8 months prior. I found out that he'd gotten engaged. So, right? I was like livid.
God, that happens a lot. I don't know what that is.
Well, and I was, I kept getting we're going to get engaged. I kept getting the promise from him, right? And then I just started screwing up the relationship. I started cheating I was just like, F this. And then I ended up moving.
You cheated on him?
Yeah, I was like at the point where I was so sick of waiting. I was in my disease too, but I was so sick of like waiting.
Punishing him.
Yeah. Right?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to show you, right? And then we broke up, and then I moved away, and then he gets engaged. So anyway, I find that out. And of course, it's more reason for me to get more fucked up than I already was. And driving back to my sister's house that night, I got a DUI. But I'm visiting right now. By now I'm a California resident, so I was visiting. And I remember my dad saying to me, he's like, well, your number was up. It's okay. I'll take care of it. Just go back to California. Wow. And literally, the consequences from that were like, I did have some. I had to go to 6 DUI classes in California. And my dad, I'm sure, paid a lawyer. He had a lawyer and paid a fine. Like, he took care of it for me,
That's amazing.
But I remember going to those 6 DUI classes and saying, I know I have a problem, but I'm not going to deal with that right now. I'm just going to take these classes. But in one of the statistics that I heard in this class was 50% of you will be back here within the next 5 years with your second DUI. And I remember that so vividly. And literally almost, probably 4.5 years to the day later, I got my second DUI, and it was in California.
The first one was in New York, and then
no, they were all in California.
Oh, both. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I digress. No, the first one was in Philadelphia, in the suburbs of Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia. I was home visiting at Christmas.
Oh, okay.
But I had to take my coursework in California because that's where I was living.
Oh, I see. Right.
And so, right. And then about 4.5 years later, I'm still living in California, and I was celebrating my 37th birthday with friends, and we'd started drinking at 5, and at midnight I pulled up in front of a liquor store and like drove over a median or whatever. I was drunk, and I just barricaded by a couple CHP officers and got my second DUI. And even worse, I was with this guy that I picked up at this bar, and I'll just say that his name was Ernie, and that's all I'm going to say, right? So that gives you the insight of what I was picking up. And he
Ernie's not a bad name, is it?
It was such a bad name. He was, oh my God, poor guy. But he had followed me in his car. So we both like barreled into the liquor store on a Saturday night at midnight, and we both barricaded by the cops. Anyway, it was so demoralizing. And it was like, I got sober as soon as, this happened, right? Like I totally sobered up, like what the hell? And I remember this guy, Ernie, in the back, we're both in the back seat of the cop car getting like hauled away. And he leans over and he says to me, well, I guess I'm not going to be able to get your number now, huh? And I was, oh my God, like FML, right? Like kill me now. But
just kill me now.
But that was the one that, really made me think like, what am I going to do? Like, this is horrible. And it just, that incomprehensible demoralization that we talk about a lot, right? That just was like hitting me so hard. And it was a horrible feeling the whole night, spending the night in the drunk tank, and then the next day getting your car, like just that shame, so much shame.
Tell me what it was like getting arrested. So they barricade you and they handcuff you. They give you a field sobriety test? Yeah.
So no, they gave me a field sobriety test. They had me, blow into a breathalyzer. They had me do it like 3 times because they said I wasn't blowing hard enough because I was trying not to,
Right.
And then just literally after I did the, walk the line, they just turned me around and said, blah, 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 we're arresting you for driving it. And I was just like, oh my God. And just, I got the one phone call. I called my sister.
Okay.
Because, that was the only number I really memorized too. They had my cell phone. This was right when cell phones were, this was back in 2004. So I didn't know anybody's phone number, but anyway, I would have called my sister anyway. And she was back east. So it was like, I don't know, 5 a.m, but she had twins. So I knew she'd be up, that kind of thing. And then, yeah, so that was, getting arrested and then having to go through the process here in California. But, the one interesting thing is, so the states were not reciprocal back then. So according to the state of California, that was my first DUI. They didn't know I had one a few years prior out of state.
Oh, okay.
So I was a first time offender.
Oh, thank God.
Funny story, fast forward about 5 years later, the states started speaking to each other, and I ended up having to go back and do a second multiple offender program for 18 years after I'd already had like 2 years of sobriety.
Oh shit, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
but by then I kind of was like, I don't care, I'm sober, sure, I'll do, here, I'm an example to you people, like kind of thing,
carrying the message.
But it was just like, yeah, you guys, it worked for me. You rehabilitated.
Okay. And so at 2 years sober, you had already started writing your book, or you were like well into your book already?
Yeah, I'd already, published it myself, but yeah, I'd already written that book by the time I had to do the multiple offender program. And it was like an 18-month program. I lost my license for a few months. I mean, it wasn't like a
gosh.
stint. Yeah. But I do remember being really angry about it. But at the time thinking, somebody's saying there's a purpose, there's a reason you're doing this, right? You're going to be a message to somebody in those classes that you're in. So
yeah. Yeah, and you never know, right?
Right.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. Yeah. Wow. I'm not sure where to go from here because that is so. Let me ask you something though. So it sounds like you had a good childhood, and although there was like examples of people using alcohol in your life, what do you think? Like looking back, was there some sort of trauma, or do you think it was environmental that you crossed the line at some point? Why do you think you developed alcoholism or addiction or whatever this is?
I'm one of the believers that I think it's genetic. I think I was born with it. Like I said, I think before I even had put alcohol in my system, I had had the isms, right? So
the restlessness, anxiety.
I was raised in an alcoholic environment. I hung out, like my best friend at the time, she was one of 5 kids. They were all partiers. The mom was a part, like,
wow.
And so was the environment too, where I was raised. Everybody drank and used the way I did, at least in my friend network. And until I got sober, I did not know that there were normal people, normie drinkers or whatever they called them. I didn't know that there were people that only had one drink, or people that just didn't drink at all.
I know, weirdos.
Why would you not? So it was my environment. And as far as crossing over the line, I used to think of that a lot. I think for me, by the time I got to 18 and started dating that drug dealer and was drinking 5 days a week, by then I'm pretty sure I was full-fledged. But then I just learned how to control it to work for me, to have a little bit of a career, because I still have that, like, there's highly functional alcoholics out there with careers, right? So I was still focusing on that. But I mean, I was doing cocaine every every weekend for over 20 years, starting probably Thursday, Friday, all the way to sometimes Monday morning. And then, a night in between, if so. So I don't know how I was able to keep a career and maintain it and be fairly successful doing all that without, really hurting myself and I put myself in bad situations, specifically with men or going to drug houses and things like that. So,
yeah, you never experienced any kind of trauma due to your drinking and using?
I'd say a couple of the drug addict boyfriends were not, they were abusive. So I guess that would be considered quote unquote trauma, but growing up, I think it was just the environment that I was growing up in. Growing up in an alcoholic environment that, they talk about it in ACA, like never knowing who's going to come home.
Oh, right. Not being
things like that.
When dad walks through the door.
Soft way, right. In the soft way, you get that trauma in a not in a hardened way, but do you know what I mean? Like just having that, you're scared all the time. You're just not emotionally mature. You're not emotionally developed. That's how I think it was. I remember telling a therapist about my childhood, and he said, well, you just grew up in a very, very toxic environment. I don't know. Is that trauma? I don't know.
So even though dad went to work and worked hard and made a lot of money and mom was home, it still felt like a toxic environment. What is your relationship with your parents like today? Are you guys all on good terms? Or?
Yeah. So it's actually funny. My dad's coming to visit me in a couple weeks.
Nice.
So that'll be nice. So sadly, my mom passed away back in 2011.
Oh.
Yeah, I was living in San Diego up until 2010, and in 2010, my mom was diagnosed, about a few months prior with this very progressive form of dementia. So my brother and sister talked about me coming back east and moving in with her and kind of figuring out what to do, because it got so progressive. Within the time I moved back, within 3 or 4 months, we had already moved her into assisted living. And so her disease was really progressive, and it ended up, she didn't die from it, but she ended up having a heart attack, which was, kind of a byproduct of the type of dementia she had. So, but, I was at peace with my mom. She was so proud of me when I got sober, and, she kind of made a joke about it. I don't think she fully understood it. Like she would bring you like a those wine bags that you put wine in, those nice bags. She would do that with like Perrier for me. And, like, I thought it was cute.
That's cute.
But I was really grateful that I was able to move back east to be with her for the last couple of years of her life. So that living amends kind of that we talk about.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So now, and, I see my brother and sister when I'm back east, or, my sister comes out here a lot for work and I get to see them. So, my relationships with my family are, very much intact.
That's very cool. So, how did you get sober?
How did I get sober?
Yeah. So you had the second DUI, and I think you mentioned that was kind of what got you into, the rooms, the 12
that was, that was definitely the catalyst. However, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to go to a meeting tomorrow. Right. I still had no desire to get sober after those DUIs. I ended up doing the box wine thing for a couple months because I didn't want to drive. So that was like my new way to drink. A girlfriend of mine, father was my DUI attorney, and she said to me, you're going to have to get this court card signed. It's your second DUI. And she had been going to AA meetings.
Oh, she had?
Yeah. But she was also partying with me. So it was a little weird, right?
So I'm drinking with you and going to meetings?
I'm thinking it's optional. Oh, I don't have to be sober because she's not sober, right?
Okay.
So she met me at my first meeting. She told me where to go, and I walked into a meeting and I sat in the back and I listened, and everything they said I related to, and I knew I needed to be there. It was like that. Yep, I know I need to be here. But I left that meeting really just ran out of there and ended up, I had to fly back east for a family function, and I drank the whole 5 days I was back there. But in my mind, I had that meeting in my head of, wow, people get and stay sober. Like it was hope, right? That meeting had anchored some hope in me. Is like, I don't know. And I don't know what happened, but the day I flew back, I decided not to drink on the plane. And the next day, because I knew I had to get this court card signed anyway. So I was like, I might as well give it a shot. Like I was kind of like, I have nothing to lose. I have to do it anyway. I might as well check this out. That was my mentality walking into an AA meeting, on my own, wanting to. It wasn't like, oh, I need to quit drinking, I'm dying. No, it was, I had to do it. Yeah. But as soon as I made that decision to say, okay, I'm going to do this and check this out, I was with the, that first meeting I was at. It was a speaker meeting. I related to everything this woman shared. And I just, I just kept coming back. I got a sponsor. I did everything they tell us to do.
Right.
And I haven't had to go back out since.
And how long has it been?
14 and a half years almost.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's all, and that first year was like going through the steps and making new friends and being in those situations though, where, wow, a drink sounds really good. I think I'm going to have a drink, and then saying, well, wait a second, like in questioning, because I don't know why I haven't had to relapse. I don't know. Like, they talk about it like it's a gift, and I'm just so grateful because I still think about drinking. I'm sure I think about it almost every day.
Do you really?
As far as like if I'm, working with a sponsee, or just even if I'm out and about, like out to dinner, and I just glance at somebody drinking, I'm like, oh, what are they drinking? Oh, wow, I haven't had that vodka yet. It's a brand new vodka that's out that I know nothing about. And then on my head will start going,
Wow.
Yeah. If I go to Rubio's to get a fish taco, they now serve sangria at Rubio's. Every time I go there, I'm like, I never had enough sangria when I was out there. God, I love sangria. I wonder what their sangria tastes like,
I have a friend that says that. I wish I could shoot heroin like a normal person.
Well, right. That's always like, God, it must be really great from what everybody talks about. But we all know that the worst possible disease.
No, but it's just one of those things. Like I smoked a lot of pot. That was like one of my favorite things to do. And, now it's legal here in California, and it's everywhere. And
is that messing with you?
I'm a little bitter about it, so I don't think about alcohol because I always talk about I have two alter egos when I start drinking. It's either Wimpy Wendy or Badass Betsy because I'm either fighting or crying. Right.
Oh, that's so funny.
And even lately, I realized that I've always had like this third alter ego. I call her Slutty Karen because she always joined the party,
That is so funny. I love your alter egos.
Yeah, they're super fun. I mean, actually, the crying and the fighting weren't super fun, but everybody loves Slutty Karen. Yeah. Forgive me for those people of you out there named Karen. I mean, I don't know why that came to me, but yeah, that's super fun. Oh, wow. So that's interesting. But what about like when you first got sober, did you feel, they say like in the beginning, how like you have the cravings and did that go away for you immediately? Like you just,
it was pretty much lifted pretty immediately.
Yeah. You were just really ready.
And that's so funny you say that. I think I was ready and I didn't know it, right? Like, but I think I was so tired when I got here. I was living my life for the same way for over 20 years. And I just didn't know what a blessing it was. Like, I like to say that, and I'm not a quote unquote super God person, but I'd like to say that it was divine intervention because, I think God brought me to AA and AA brought me to God as far as like I said earlier, if I didn't have the DUI, I probably wouldn't have shown it. I wouldn't have gotten sober.
That's interesting.
No desire, but I knew I had a problem for years. I knew I had a problem with drugs. I knew I had a problem with drinking, but I just kept surrounding myself with people that were worse than me or just as bad.
Yeah. That whole seeking lower companionship thing.
Right. Oh yeah. That was definitely happening. And especially the last few years of my drinking. I mean, I was, in my late 30s and hanging out with kids and they're like 22, 23 years old and me rationalizing that very well.
You're like, what am I doing here?
Yeah. I mean, a part of me thought it was cool, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, no, they're probably like, who's this old lady hanging out with us? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. After a while, it stops being kind of cute. You know what I mean? Like you can get away with
totally. But no, I didn't have any cravings. I mean, I think if anything, I romance it more, but I don't, I haven't seen cocaine since I got sober. I don't know what that would look like for me, but, seeing drinking a lot it gets my head going, but for me, I have to play the tape through. That's what I did a lot in the beginning, and I still do it because I'm the kind of gal that I'll start out at the Ritz-Carlton for a nice glass of Merlot at the bar. And I'm ending up at that skanky dive bar drinking watered down beer
with Ernie,
right? With anybody that'll have me. And that was my story for so long,
I totally get it.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I'm curious though, because I didn't hear you talking about growing up with religion. You didn't grow up with a lot of religion?
Well, I was raised Catholic. I had to go to like CCD and had to go to church. But pretty much as soon as I turned 18 and whenever left the house at like 21, 22, I didn't really go to church unless it was for Christmas or a wedding.
Okay.
So when I came into the program and they said, oh, you have to find this higher power, I was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. I can handle that. I didn't have a problem with that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was really easy for me. That's maintaining that it's like, right, relying on God and really trusting God and trusting the process. That's harder than just believing in a God.
Okay, so talk to me about trusting God. And I only ask because I had a rough day today. And when I have a rough day, I'll reach out to someone else and, talk about what's going on. That's how I relieve stress and do emotion management, all that stuff, is by sharing,
Right.
And the solution that was presented to me was the golden key. Have you ever heard like golden key? It's like whenever you become fearful or whatever. I think it was a little booklet written by Emmett Fox. I think it was Emmett Fox.
Oh, yeah. I think you're right.
What I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about. I don't have that. I have a couple of his books, but I don't have that one. But
yeah, there's a lady in my group of friends who hands it, like when everyone has a sober birthday or something like that, she gives a little booklet and this little golden key. And so somebody said to me, oh, golden key, think of God. But there are some days, don't you find, Nancy, that there are some days it's just so hard to trust that everything is going to work out? Yeah,
there are a lot. I've had a lot of days like that where I'm not going to get what I want. It's usually right. So I have to trust that God's going to take care of me no matter what. Mm-hmm. Which is really hard to do. But I had a woman. It was probably one of my sponsors. Say something to me once like, "You don't have to do any worrying because God already knows what's going to happen." Mm-hmm. Just kind of, it's kind of like, it sounds so corny, but it's like, let go and let God. Like, if the more I try to control something, the worse it is. And especially it's that mental, midget in my head, that mind fuck that we call it, like just the craziness of what my head's telling me. And 99% of the time that never comes to fruition. Mm-hmm. So, but I have gone through times in my sobriety, as I'm sure you have, having, a few years where I have trusted God and I have not trusted God. And the more times that I trust God and realize that everything's going to be okay, the easier it is to keep trusting him. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that.
Yeah.
And how did your relationship with God evolve over the last 14 and a half years?
Yeah, I like to say I've had to enlarge my God a number of times. So when I first got sober, I lived right by the beach in Encinitas, the town I got sober in. It was really easy to find a God at the beach and meditation and hanging out in these beautiful, areas. And then when I was about 5.5 years sober, I moved back east. My mother got ill and I commuted into Center City, Philadelphia. And so I'd have to, my prayer and meditation was now on a SEPTA commuter train, right? So it was completely different. But I really needed God more then than I did prior because of just the situation within my family and my mom.
Had to be so.
So it's really just a matter of making the time and also just being okay with like not knowing what's going to happen. And like you were just talking about, like trusting God. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's really making sure I have that quiet time, right? So I pray in the morning and I pray at night and I try to do, a few minutes of meditation a day. However, we got a new dog a few months ago and she, as soon as I move around in the bed in the morning, she's up, she's running around. She needs to go out, right? Put into my prayer and meditation a little bit. So I kind of meditate on her, which I know sounds weird, but it's just what's working for me.
Listen, I have a dog I love.
Just her and I and our walk and I really focus on that. And that's just how it's been lately. But, I have to keep enlarging my God because, what's the one thing that they talk about? Like, I forget what it is about, enlarging your God as far as, bring your problems to God and don't bring God to your problems or something like that, where it's just like, I just know I'm always going to be taken care of. It's always happened. It's not always the way I want, whatever happens in that situation or that scenario. But ultimately it's exactly what, is needed or what God feels is best for me. And it's just trusting that path, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love that. It, I was told a long time ago, the prayer that never fails is thy will be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I love that. Yeah. And I have found that over the years too, that, I sometimes think that, oh, the solution is either A or B. And
Mhm.
it's like with my limited thinking and vision, I think it's got to be one or two things. And so many times, like something completely unforeseen happens. That's
Mhm.
way better. And
Yeah.
so with those moments under my belt, those are the times when I can, go, oh, that's right. Like what you were saying, that
Yeah.
everything has always worked out, and even sometimes better than I had hoped.
Right. Well, and I have like alarms on my phone, like things that were like besides prayer meditation, there's
Mhm.
this, I try to come to every situation with love and compassion,
Mm.
versus trying to take somebody's inventory and being annoyed early on or off the bat. So I try to focus on that. How you start your day, like you're all like, yes, I'm here, God, I'm your channel. And then like 10 minutes later, you're like, F that, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to be mad at him for this. And, like it all goes out the window,
Right.
right? So it's more important for me to kind of get centered back in again. And
Yeah.
usually it's like literally just taking my dog out for a walk in the middle of the day and going, okay, like taking 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's my favorite thing to do. I have a little English bulldog, and we'll go
Oh,
around. Yeah.
I love those. Ours is a boxer.
Oh, it's a smush face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the squishy face. Yeah.
What's your dog's name?
Her name is Bailey, which means sweet girl.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. Oh,
Yeah.
they're cute dogs.
What's your
Yeah,
dog's
so
name?
I don't know, love and compassion. I love that. So treating people with love and compassion, instead of coming from like fear and control
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
judgment or whatever. I like that. And isn't it amazing how just a little animal that looks at you with nothing but unconditional love,
Right.
that is I could see how that would be very meditative, because it brings you right into the present moment.
Exactly. And I've just in the last year, I've really, really been focusing on living in the day,
Mm.
not living in the past, not projecting and worrying. The thing about worrying is like worrying doesn't take away tomorrow's problems. It just takes away today's peace. Like that's something I have.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
I think it's on a magnet in my kitchen, but,
That's
so I'm
good.
really focused on living in the day, and I have to tell you, it's changed a lot of just like how I am. Like I'm just like, this is it, like I'm just gonna focus on the moment and really, one day at a time. Hey, the ODAT chat, right?
I know. I know. And I was going to say that's usually like my wrap up question, because, but you've already kind of mentioned about, so I usually wrap up the podcast with, since it's called, ODAT, one day at a time, like how do you stay sober one day at a time? And I love all the tools that you're using. You're talking about prayer and meditation. And do you still regularly go to meetings?
I do. I go to probably 4 or 5 meetings a week.
Mhm.
I'm really connected to the fellowship where I live. I have 3 women I sponsor. I have a sponsor. I do a lot of service work. So I'm really kind of connected to the community, the 12-step community around me. And honestly, that's where my friends are. Like, I
I
don't, the
know.
friends that I have that drink or people that I've worked, like, I don't hang out with people that drink. It's so nice
Yeah.
not to have like, it's just such a great lifestyle. I
And we
don't even,
save a lot of money.
yeah, right? I know, right? And then I just spend it on clothes or food
Something
or
else.
sugar or something else. Yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I really kind of value that mentality, and it's just a lot easier. I just know through the years I've become a lot softer, and I'm just kind of
Mm.
like, they say wear the world is a loose garment, that
Yeah.
saying. So it's
Mhm.
just like, okay, I don't get as annoyed and upset as I used to about little things.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
my husband would say that, but that's how I feel.
Hey, it's all about progress, right? Your own
Right,
personal progress.
right, exactly.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, and we chatted just a little bit before we started recording, was so you and I are both we kind of grew up in the room, so to speak,
Right,
and
exactly.
became indoctrinated into this way of thinking in the 12-step community. But I'm sure after you wrote your book, and even much later, I think you said it sat on the shelf till like 2015. I would say like in the last few
Hmm.
years, I've been doing my podcast for a couple of years. You shared an experience about how your mind has been open to the rest of the world and how other people find recover. Do you want to just kind of share a little bit about how your views about recovery has changed since you sort of went mainstream with it?
Completely. Yeah. So before I kind of was out, I'll say, in the social media world with my blog and my book, I just assumed that everybody got sober through 12-step.
Right.
I heard about smart recovery. I'm like, that sounds stupid. I heard about Christian-based recovery, which I was like, that's great, whatever works for them. And then I started hearing about things like hip sobriety school, or women. There's a woman, I forget what it's called now, but there is a women's fellowship out there that gets women sober. I forget, it's Women for Sobriety or something like that, I think.
It's like an online community?
Yeah, I think so. And then there's communities like She Recovers, and I started learning about all these other ways that people stay and get sober. And at first I was like, really? Like, how does that work? Like, I like to go to a meeting. I like to listen to other people.
I know.
But it works for them, right? And they surround themselves with other like-minded people. And they've just embraced it in a different way. I think some started out in a 12-step and then went off on their own and found a way that worked for them through yoga, meditation, or whichever spiritual practice that they use day to day. And I'm like, more power to them. I think it's great. I love hearing that there's other ways for people to get and stay sober. I mean, there was a woman who reached out to me from the She Recovers group on Facebook who lives down the street from me, who's never been to a meeting, who's completely scared to go to a meeting, but she's been sober through the She Recovers group. Like, things like that. Yeah. I mean, I keep telling her I'll take her to a meeting and she doesn't seem to want to go to one, which is fine. I'm still talking to her, but I'm just like, and when people ask me things like that, I say, well, this is what I know worked for me. 14 and a half years ago, there wasn't an online sober community. Right. So this is what works for me. I'm not, is AA perfect? No, there's a lot of stuff in AA and in the, especially in the mainstream media that I don't agree with or whatever, but Alcoholics Anonymous saved my life. It gave me my life back. So for me to like not want to kind of honor that fellowship and that recovery, program or design for living, as we call it, I think it'd be a disservice to myself. But I think it's amazing that there's so many other ways that people get and stay sober. And I love hearing about them too.
Yeah, I have changed my mind in a lot of it has opened my mind as well. And I've learned that, well, first of all, in the medical book, they used to define mental illness. I don't think alcoholism is actually recognized. The term alcoholism isn't recognized. They call it alcohol use disorder because it's now recognized as a spectrum.
Right.
And I think that people that do end up in 12-step, like I was at a meeting this morning where this guy was sober 9 years and he didn't take the steps but he went to meetings. Like he just got sober going to meetings and then had something challenging happen. I think he had like a financial crisis and then he made a bad decision. And he said within 3 weeks, he was not only just selling dope, but shooting it and cheating on his wife, like within 3 weeks.
Wow.
After 9 years.
Well, there's a lot of people that get sober in AA and stay sober through the fellowship and don't do the step, right? Yeah. And hey, that works for them. Great. But, I heard early on too, why join a 12-step program if you're not going to work the steps? Yeah, seriously. So that's what resonates with me.
Yeah. I just feel like, gosh, if people would only take the steps or go, like I want your friend to go to the meeting because I continue to go. You mentioned going 4 or 5 meetings a week. And sometimes people ask me, why do you still go? And I'm like, why wouldn't I? Right. I'll get like 10 hugs in the morning, at 6 p.m. meeting. And there are people who love me there. And
right. They're more people, right?
Like we have a tribe and we're all there to just love and support each other. And I get that heart connection. And that's what fills my heart up so that I can go face my day. And
exactly. Yeah.
So why wouldn't I go? I want your friend to go.
Well, I do too. And it's funny. One of the women I sponsor, she actually found me through Tammy Salas, the Unruffled podcast. She found me through Tammy. I met her. She lives about 40 minutes away. I'm still sponsoring her. She has about 6 months now. And she's just now getting to meetings 3 or 4 times a week. But in the beginning, she would only go to 1 meeting a week that she met me at. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to show you what worked for me. And we're going to go through the steps. And now she's getting much more connected to her, neighborhood fellowship.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So you guys worked the steps together, even though she wasn't attending meetings. So that's
She was attending like one meeting a week. Right. And then I kept pushing her to go to more. But at the same time, I was like, I'm not going to push her too hard,
Encouragement.
Yeah, but now she's going 4 or 5 times a week. So
yeah,
I think it's like once you start going more and more, especially in your neighborhood, and you get to know people and they're excited to see you.
Yeah.
And you take interest in other people's stories. I mean, that's where that connection is. That's where that bond is to want to keep coming back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Listen, I know you have to go pretty soon, but I just want to tell you, I am so grateful that you made time for me and that you were able to come onto the podcast. And I just am going to encourage everybody to get your book, Last Call, the best drinking memoir title ever. So good.
It's in paperback as well as Kindle version. So you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, I'll leave links in the show notes.
Okay, great.
To your book and to your blog as well.
Sure.
And yeah, I just want to encourage you to continue to write.
Thank you. And you too. I love your writing. Well,
thank you.
And, this has been really fun. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Well, listen, you have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
All right, you have a great night. Thanks.
You too.
Bye. One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.